"Mom, if we miss another payment, the bank could take the house," my son told me. 3 weeks later, I stood outside his front door in the rain while my belongings sat in black trash bags beside the garage. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. At 66 years old, I sold the last gift my husband ever gave me because I believed saving my son mattered more than holding on to my grief. The diamond necklace wasn't extravagant by Beverly Hills standards, but to me it was priceless. Richard gave it to me on our 40th wedding anniversary during a trip to Cape Cod, only 8 months before cancer took him from me. I still remembered the harbor lights outside the restaurant window, the smell of butter and warm bread, and the way his hands shook when he clasped it around my neck. He smiled and said, "So you'll always know how beautiful you are, even after I'm gone." After he died, I kept the necklace inside a velvet box in the top drawer of my dresser. Some nights, when the house felt too quiet, I opened the box just to hold it. It was not jewelry anymore. It was proof that I had once been loved without having to beg for a place at the table. But memories do not pay mortgages. Memories do not stop collection notices. And memories certainly do not rescue a struggling business drowning in debt. "Mom, I hate even asking this," Daniel said over the phone, his voice rough and tired. I sat at my kitchen table, staring through the window at the bare maple tree Richard had planted the year Daniel was born. "What happened, sweetheart? We're behind on everything," he said. "The business is bleeding money. Vanessa says we just need a little time, but if we miss another payment..." He stopped. I waited. The bank could take the house. The house. My son's house. My granddaughter Sophie's bedroom. The porch where she drew chalk flowers every summer. "What about the business loan?" I asked. There was a pause. "Vanessa says we've exhausted our options." Vanessa says. Those 2 words had become the doorway into every painful conversation with Daniel. Vanessa says Sunday dinner is too much pressure. Vanessa says Sophie needs boundaries. Vanessa says you should call before stopping by. Vanessa says, I loved my son more than anything in this world. I had carried him for 9 months. I had worked double shifts when Richard was laid off when Daniel was 10. I skipped vacations, delayed dental work, wore the same winter coat for 12 years so Daniel could graduate college without debt. Mothers do not stop being mothers because their children become adults. So 2 days later I drove downtown and sold the necklace. The young woman behind the counter examined it under a bright lamp. "This is a beautiful piece," she said gently. "Are you sure?" "No." I wanted to say no. I wanted to take it back, press it against my chest, and run outside like a foolish old woman who still believed love could be preserved inside velvet. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap. "My son needs help," I said. That afternoon, I wired nearly $80,000 into Daniel's account. Every diamond, every memory, gone with the push of a button. Less than 20 minutes later, Vanessa called. Not Daniel. Vanessa. "Helen, oh my God," she said, her voice trembling. "You have no idea what this means to us." I could hear tears, or something that sounded like tears. "Your family," I told her. "That's what family does." She breathed out softly. "You really are the heart of this family." For the first time in months, I let myself believe her. That was my first mistake. For the next few days, Daniel texted me more than usual. "Good morning, Mom. Hope you slept okay. Sophie asked about you." Little messages. Ordinary messages. The kind I used to receive before Vanessa became the gatekeeper of his attention. I knew better than to trust sudden warmth. At least part of me did. But another part of me was still a mother sitting beside a silent phone, grateful for any sign that her child remembered she existed. Vanessa invited me to Sunday dinner. "I know things have been tense," she said, "but we'd love to have you over." She said it gently, almost shyly, as though she were offering peace. I spent that afternoon making lemon bars because Daniel loved them as a boy. I wrapped them carefully in wax paper, the way my mother used to do, and changed my blouse twice before leaving. When I arrived, Vanessa opened the door before I could knock. "Helen," she said warmly. She hugged me tightly. Too tightly. Her perfume was expensive and floral, the kind that stayed in a room after she left. "You look beautiful," she said. "I love that sweater." I touched the sleeve self-consciously. "Thank you." Daniel appeared behind her, smiling tiredly. "Hey, Mom." He kissed my cheek. For a moment, I let the smallness of it comfort me. Dinner was roasted chicken, asparagus, and mashed potatoes in a serving bowl I had given Vanessa years earlier. Sophie ran into the dining room with paint on her fingers and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Grandma Helen." That was the first real thing I felt all night. During dinner, Vanessa poured me wine before I asked. She laughed at my small jokes. She asked about my garden. She even said she wanted my recipe for chicken soup. "I've never been able to make it like you," she said. Daniel nodded. "Mom's soup fixes everything." I smiled down at my plate. For a moment, the room felt almost normal. Almost. But there were little things. Daniel did not look at me when Vanessa praised me. Vanessa asked questions but never waited long for the answers. When Sophie tried to tell me about a school project, Vanessa interrupted and said, "Sweetheart, Grandma doesn't need every detail." I watched Sophie's face fall slightly. Then she went quiet. After dessert, Vanessa rested her hand over mine. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Her fingers were cool. Daniel sat beside her, nodding. But his eyes were fixed on the table. I wanted him to say something. Anything. "Thank you, Mom. I'm sorry we had to ask. I know what that necklace meant." But he only said, "Yeah, thanks." On the drive home, I tried not to let that hurt. Old habits are stubborn. I told myself men were not always good with emotions. I told myself Daniel was stressed. I told myself Vanessa was trying. When I got home, the house was dark except for the lamp beside Richard's chair. I went upstairs and opened the empty velvet box. For a moment, grief hit me so sharply. I had to sit on the edge of the bed. The indentation where the necklace had rested was still visible in the pale satin lining. I touched it with one finger. Then I whispered to Richard, "It helped our boy." I wanted that to be enough. I truly did. 7 days later, rain soaked through my coat as I stood outside Daniel's house with grocery bags cutting into my fingers. I had made homemade chicken soup and fresh bread. Daniel had not answered my calls all morning, but I assumed he was busy. That was what mothers do. We build explanations before our children have to offer them. The porch steps were slick. I reached into my purse for my spare key. It would not turn. I frowned and tried again. Nothing. For a few seconds I stared at the lock as if my hands had forgotten how keys worked. Then the little camera above the door blinked blue. A speaker crackled. "Hello." Vanessa's voice. Calm. Distant. Like I was a delivery driver. "Oh good," I said, forcing a small laugh. I thought maybe the lock was jammed. There was a silence long enough for me to hear cars moving through the wet street behind me. "The locks were changed yesterday," she said. I blinked. "Changed? Daniel thinks it's better if you stop coming by without calling first." "I did call," I said. "Several times. We've been very busy." Her voice did not rise. That made it worse. I tightened my grip around the soup container. "I brought dinner. Daniel loves chicken soup when the weather turns cold." The camera blinked again. "You can leave it at the door." My chest tightened. "Vanessa, what's going on?" This time her answer came too quickly. "We just need space right now, Helen." Space. After everything. I looked through the rain-speckled glass beside the door, hoping to see my son. A shadow moved somewhere deeper in the house. Then disappeared. He was there. He could hear every word. "Can I speak to Daniel?" I asked quietly. Another pause. Then Vanessa said, "He agrees this is for the best." The words entered me slowly. Not like a slap. Like cold water filling a room. Across the street, a woman walking a golden retriever slowed down and glanced toward me. I suddenly knew exactly how I looked. An old woman standing in the rain outside her own son's house. Unwanted. Holding soup. Then I noticed the trash bags near the garage. 3 of them. One had split open from the rain, and I could see the edge of a floral blanket inside. My blanket. The one Richard and I bought in Vermont during an autumn trip. I stepped off the porch. My hands were trembling before I opened the first bag. Inside were framed family photos, winter coats, books I kept in their guest room, and the little ceramic angel Sophie painted for me when she was 6. Tossed together like donation leftovers. Rain had soaked through the cardboard frame holding a photo of Daniel at 8 years old, sitting on Richard's shoulders at Disney World. His chocolate ice cream smile blurred beneath the plastic. "Please take your things today," Vanessa's voice called through the speaker. "We're trying to move forward." Move forward. As though I were clutter. As though I were grief they had decided to clean out of the garage. I looked back at the door. Waiting. Waiting for Daniel to open it. Waiting for my son to act like my son. But the door never opened. The porch light glowed against the rain. The camera watched in silence. And standing there beside trash bags filled with pieces of my life, I realized something far more painful than losing money. My sacrifice had not made me family to them. It had only made me useful. I drove home with the windshield wipers fighting the rain. Every turn made the trash bags slide across the back seat. A picture frame knocked against the door. A book fell open. The soup sat untouched on the passenger floor, still warm, the lid fogged from steam. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Daniel was overwhelmed. Vanessa had misunderstood. Maybe I had made them feel pressured. Maybe mothers could love too much. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the rain had slowed to a cold mist. The house stood dark except for the porch light I always forgot to turn off. Richard used to tease me about that. "You're lighting the way for ghosts, Helen." I carried the bags inside one at a time. They left puddles across the hardwood floor Richard had installed himself 30 years earlier. By the time I finished, my arms ached and my knees throbbed. I stood in the living room staring at the black bags piled beside the couch. They looked like evidence. Not of a crime anyone could report. Something quieter. Something families do when they want to erase someone without admitting they are doing it. I pulled out one framed photograph. Daniel at 8, ice cream on his face at Navy Pier in Chicago. He had wrapped his arms around my neck that day and told me I was his best friend in the whole world. I sat on the couch holding that picture against my chest. The house was silent. Not peaceful. Silent. The next morning, I woke hoping there would be a voicemail. Nothing. At noon I texted Daniel. "I think we need to talk, sweetheart." The typing bubble appeared. Then disappeared. Hours passed. I sent another message. "I just want to understand what happened." Still nothing. That night I heated a bowl of soup and took 2 bites before pushing it away. The bread I had baked for them sat on the counter, untouched, already hardening at the edges. At 9 o'clock my phone buzzed. My heart jumped. But it was Grace Miller. "You sound terrible," she said the moment I answered. I had not realized I sounded like I had been crying. Grace and I had met nearly 20 years earlier through a church fundraiser. After Richard died, she was one of the few people who still checked on me without needing anything. "What happened?" she asked. At first I told her everything was fine. That old habit of protecting family ran deep. But eventually the whole story spilled out. The locks. The camera. The trash bags. Daniel inside the house saying nothing. Grace went quiet. Then she said, "Helen, that didn't happen overnight." I wiped my face. "What do you mean? People don't pack up your belongings in garbage bags by accident." Her words settled heavily in my chest. Because deep down I already knew. The next few days became a loneliness I had never known before. Worse than widowhood. Because Richard had not chosen to leave me. Daniel had. I started noticing all the little humiliations I had ignored for years. Tiny things. Small enough to dismiss individually. Together they formed a picture I could no longer avoid. There were dinners where Vanessa seated me at the far end of the table while her parents sat beside Daniel. Holidays where my suggestions were ignored until someone younger repeated them. Birthdays where I brought expensive gifts and received a clearance candle wrapped in a gift bag reused from someone else's party. The way Vanessa introduced me as Daniel's mom instead of Helen. The way Daniel stopped calling me first. The way family photos always seemed to happen while I was in the kitchen. I remembered Thanksgiving 2 years earlier. I had arrived early with 2 pumpkin pies and a casserole dish wrapped in foil. Vanessa opened the door and looked surprised. "Oh," she said. "You're early. You told me noon." I said around noon. I had stood there in the foyer holding warm food while laughter came from the dining room. Everyone was already seated. Vanessa's mother was in the chair beside Daniel. My usual chair. A folding chair had been placed near the hallway. "Hope you don't mind," Vanessa said. We had to adjust seating. I told her I did not mind, Of course I did not. Women like me were raised to treat our own humiliation as a minor inconvenience. By Friday, Daniel finally texted. I think it's better if we all take some space right now. One sentence. No apology. No explanation. Not even love, Mom. I stared at the message under the dim kitchen light. Then a realization began settling into me. Vanessa may have changed the locks, but Daniel had handed her the key. The following Sunday was Sophie's 10th birthday. Grace told me not to go. They owe you an apology before they deserve your presence anywhere, she said. But Sophie was turning 10, and the thought of missing her birthday hurt more than my pride could protect me. So I wrapped the art set I had bought weeks earlier, put on my beige wool coat and drove across town. The party was at Vanessa's sister's house in a quiet suburb lined with white fences and trimmed hedges. I sat in my car for nearly 2 minutes before getting out. The moment I walked into the backyard, I felt it. That shift in the air when people know something about you before you speak. Conversations softened. A few relatives gave me careful smiles. Vanessa stood near the patio table in cream-colored slacks, holding sparkling water. When she saw me, surprise crossed her face. Then the performance began. Helen, she said brightly, you made it. She kissed the air beside my cheek. Daniel stood behind her near the grill. He gave a small wave. He did not walk over, did not hug me, did not ask how I was after letting my belongings sit in the rain. Happy birthday to Sophie, I said, handing Vanessa the gift. That's very generous, she said. The word generous landed strangely. All afternoon I noticed little things. Vanessa's mother helped Sophie open presents while I sat alone at the far end of the patio. Family photos were taken without me until someone finally said, "Oh, Helen, squeeze in quick." I stood on the edge of the picture. At one point, near the dessert table, I heard Vanessa speaking to her cousin. Some people think helping financially means they get emotional control forever. They both glanced at me, then looked away. My cheeks burned. Not from rage. From the particular shame of being insulted quietly enough that objecting would make you look unstable. Later, Sophie ran over and hugged my waist. Grandma Helen, are you coming over for Christmas? Before I could answer, Vanessa laughed lightly. We're still figuring out holiday plans, sweetheart. Then she looked at me. Boundaries are important for healthy families. The table went silent. Daniel stared down at his paper plate. Not one word. That was the moment something inside me changed. I had blamed Vanessa for everything, but none of it would have been possible without Daniel allowing it. When the party ended, I hugged Sophie tightly. Vanessa called after me, smiling. Drive safe, Helen. I turned back. I always do, I said. And for the first time in a long time it felt like the truth. 3 days after Sophie's party, Grace came over carrying 2 coffees and an expression I knew too well. We sat at the kitchen table where Richard used to read the Sunday paper. Outside, November wind rattled the nearly bare trees. I did something you may hate, Grace said. That usually means, I definitely will. She pulled printed papers from her purse. I ran into my nephew Ryan. He works at the bank Daniel uses. My stomach tightened. Grace. He didn't tell me private details, she said quickly. But after I told him what happened, he mentioned something public. I stared at the papers. The refinance paperwork on Daniel's house was processed almost 2 months ago. I looked up slowly. What refinance paperwork? Grace slid the papers across the table. Helen, your money wasn't used to save the mortgage. The room went quiet. Too quiet. I picked up the papers with trembling fingers. Most of it was public property information, but one line near the bottom made my chest tighten. Home equity refinancing approved. Date processed. 8 weeks earlier. 8 weeks. Daniel had told me they were about to lose the house 3 weeks ago. That can't be right, I whispered. Grace's eyes softened. I think they were in trouble, but not the kind they described. Pieces began fitting together. Vanessa's sudden warmth. The expensive dining set she posted online. The ski trip photos her sister accidentally tagged her in. The changed locks after the transfer cleared. Oh my God, I said. Grace nodded. I think they needed cash. And Vanessa knew where to get it. Daniel would never. But even as I said it, the words sounded weak. Grace reached across the table. Helen, loving someone doesn't erase what they're capable of when they're desperate or weak. Weak. That word stayed with me. Because evil would have been easier. Evil is clear. Weakness hides behind silence. That night I opened Facebook. Vanessa had posted a photo from a rooftop restaurant. Daniel sat beside her smiling with a drink in his hand. The caption read, "Feeling grateful for fresh starts and peaceful boundaries." More than 80 people had liked it. One comment said, "Sometimes toxic family members force you to make hard choices." Toxic. I stared at that word until my vision blurred. After everything I had sacrificed, I had become the villain in their story. Then my eyes drifted toward the hallway closet. Richard's old leather briefcase sat on the top shelf, untouched since his funeral. Inside were documents he always told me not to ignore. Financial records, property papers, insurance information, trust documents. For months I avoided opening it because grief made paper feel unbearable. But that night I realized something. If Daniel and Vanessa treated me like someone disposable, it was time to stop behaving like someone powerless. The next morning, I took Richard's leather briefcase down from the closet. Dust clung to the corners. My hands rested on the worn handle longer than necessary. Richard used to sit at this same table every April, organizing taxes with military precision while drinking black coffee and humming Frank Sinatra. He believed paperwork told the truth before people did. I used to laugh at him. Now I understood. Inside were folders stacked neatly in his handwriting. Insurance, property, investments, trust. I spent 4 hours going through everything with a yellow legal pad beside me. The more I read, the more I realized how carefully Richard had protected me. Our home was fully paid off. The small cabin in Maine was solely in my name. Several investment accounts had grown larger than I realized. Then I found the family trust. A handwritten note was clipped to the front. "Helen, kindness should never leave you vulnerable." I sat there staring at those words. The house made its small old sounds around me. The refrigerator hummed. A floorboard creaked. Outside, a delivery truck passed. Life continued, indifferent to revelation. By Wednesday, I scheduled an appointment with Rebecca Lawson, a family estate attorney downtown. Her office smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and lemon furniture polish. She was in her early 50s, sharp-eyed but kind, with silver streaks in her dark hair. She listened quietly while I explained everything. The money, the locks, the trash bags, the birthday party. Unlike me, she did not look shocked. "Unfortunately," she said, "financial manipulation inside families happens more often than people admit." Hearing it stated plainly made my stomach ache. Rebecca reviewed my documents carefully. "Your current will leaves the majority of your estate directly to Daniel," she said. "Do you wish to change that?" The old version of me would have cried. The old version of me would have defended him. But something inside me had become still. Not cold. Awake. "Yes," I said. "Ido." We discussed charitable trusts, healthcare directives, long-term protections, and a separate education fund for Sophie that Daniel and Vanessa could not touch. Adult conversations. Serious conversations. The kind they assumed I was too emotional or too old to understand. Before I left, Rebecca handed me preliminary revisions. "One more thing," she said. "Stop providing informal financial support." I almost laughed. There was nothing left in me they could take easily. That evening, while I stood in the grocery store comparing prices on canned tomatoes, Daniel texted, "Hey Mom, hope you're okay. Things have been stressful lately." I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. "Vanessa mentioned you still have some old paperwork connected to Dad's accounts. We should probably organize that together sometime." I stood beneath the fluorescent lights while shoppers moved around me. This was not guilt. This was access. For the first time since Richard died, I did not feel heartbroken reading Daniel's message. I felt clear-headed. And clarity, I was learning, could be stronger than grief. Changing a will sounds simple until you sit in a lawyer's office and remove your child's name from the future you once imagined for him. Rebecca explained everything twice. Not because I could not understand. Because she could see my hands trembling. "This does not mean you hate him," she said. I looked down at the pen. "I know. But knowing and feeling are different things." Daniel was still the baby I rocked through ear infections. The little boy who cried when his goldfish died. The teenager who brought me gas station flowers after his first big argument with Richard. He was also the man who let me stand in the rain. Both things were true. That was the hardest part. I changed the estate plan. Daniel would receive a small protected amount, released slowly and only under conditions. Sophie's education fund would be preserved. A portion would go to a women's legal aid charity. Another portion would support a hospice foundation in Richard's name. The main cabin stayed mine alone. When I signed the final page, my hand shook once, then steadied. Rebecca placed the documents into a folder. You've made a responsible decision. Responsible. Not cruel. Not vengeful. Responsible. Still, I cried in the parking garage afterward. Not loudly. Just sitting in my car with both hands on the steering wheel, tears slipping down my face while someone's headlights swept across the concrete wall. That night Daniel called. I almost did not answer. Hi Mom, he said. His voice was careful. Sweetheart. I was thinking maybe we could come by this weekend. We. Not I. What for? He hesitated. Just to talk. Vanessa thinks things got out of hand. There it was. Passive language. Things got out of hand. As if locks changed themselves. As if trash bags packed themselves. As I remember, I said quietly, you were there. Silence. Then he sighed. Mom, it wasn't that simple. No, I said. It was worse. He did not answer. For once, I let the silence belong to him. December came with freezing rain and gray skies. Daniel stopped pretending to check on me after I ignored his request about the paperwork. Days passed without a call. Strangely, the absence no longer hurt the same way. Pain loses some power when disappointment becomes familiar. One Thursday afternoon, Grace came over with takeout soup and Christmas catalogs neither of us planned to order from. We sat beside the fireplace while soft jazz played from Richard's old stereo. You seem calmer, she said. I looked into my tea. I think I stopped waiting for them to become different people. Grace nodded. Then my phone buzzed. Daniel. I stared at it before answering. Sweetheart. Hey Mom. His voice sounded strained. Everything okay? Actually, things have been rough. Of course they had. The business lost a major client, he said. And some unexpected house expenses came up. Unexpected expenses. Such gentle words for consequences. I'm sorry to hear that. Vanessa's been really stressed. Even now, his instinct was to protect her comfort before acknowledging my pain. Daniel, I said, why did you let me stand outside your house in the rain? Silence. Real silence. Mom, you packed my belongings in trash bags. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? He breathed heavily. Vanessa thought boundaries would help. Boundaries. That word again. People used to talk about boundaries to protect themselves from harm. Now Vanessa used it to justify treating people as disposable. I see, I said. Daniel cleared his throat. Maybe we could have dinner before Christmas. Start fresh. Start fresh. As if betrayal could be reset when money became tight again. That's thoughtful, I said. Let me think about it. His relief came too quickly. After we hung up, Grace looked at me. How bad is it? I gave a tired smile. Bad enough to remember he has a mother. That night, I checked Vanessa's social media. The rooftop photos were gone. The ski trip pictures too. In their place were vague quotes about hard seasons and discovering who truly supports you. I closed the laptop. They had mistaken my love for an unlimited resource. Now the resource was gone. And reality was arriving. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow and bitter cold. For the first time in more than 30 years, I did not host dinner. No turkey. No pies cooling on the counter. No Christmas music in the kitchen. The house was quieter than usual. But not empty. There is a difference between loneliness and peace. I was learning it slowly. At 4 o'clock, Vanessa called. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then it rang again. I answered. Hello. Helen, Vanessa said warmly. Merry Christmas Eve. The careful voice of someone who needed something. Merry Christmas, Vanessa. We were hoping you might come to dinner tonight. Sophie keeps asking about you. Of course she did. Children remember love even when adults rewrite history. That's kind, I said. But I already have plans. Grace was coming over with lasagna and cheap wine. It was technically true. Vanessa hesitated. Daniel really wants to see you. Weeks ago, Daniel could barely answer my calls. Now he wanted reconciliation when financial pressure had closed in. How is the business? I asked. Silence. It's been stressful, she admitted. There it was. Not. Apology. Need. Actually, she continued, there are some things we should discuss as a family. Family. Such a convenient word after treating me like garbage left beside a garage door. Then Daniel took the phone. Mom. Danielle. I know things got messy. Messy. Another soft word for cruelty. But maybe tonight we can move forward. Move forward to what? He exhaled. We miss you. The sentence hung there. Not false. Incomplete. Daniel, I said. When your father was dying, he made me promise something. He went silent. He told me never to let kindness become permission for people to use me. Neither of them spoke. For a long time I ignored that because you are my son. But I understand now. Vanessa whispered something in the background. Urgent. Sharp. Mom, Daniel said. Nobody used you. I let the silence stretch. Then why did changing the locks happen so easily? No answer. Because there was no graceful answer. Finally I said, I hope things improve for both of you. But I'm not coming tonight. Then I ended the call. An hour later, Grace arrived wearing a ridiculous Santa hat. I laughed harder than I had in months. Outside, snow fell across the neighborhood. Inside, my little house felt warm again. By early spring, the snow had melted. The trees outside my kitchen window began blooming again. Something inside me healed with the season. Not completely. Healing is not a door you walk through once. It is a room you learn to live in. There were still lonely mornings. Still moments when I missed the version of Daniel I had believed in. But grief changes shape when you stop feeding it with hope that gives nothing back. In February, I sold the cabin in Maine. Daniel had always assumed it would be his someday. I did not sell it out of revenge. That surprised me. Months earlier, I might have wanted him to feel the helplessness I felt outside his locked door. But anger is exhausting when carried too long. What I wanted was freedom. The money allowed me to renovate a small storefront near the marina 2 towns over. Nothing extravagant. Pale blue walls. Warm lights. Antique display cases. A brass bell above the door. I named it Whitmore and Company after Richard. I restored vintage jewelry. Some afternoons, widows came in carrying old rings and broken lockets. They told me stories about husbands they still missed, daughters who lived too far away, sons who called only when life fell apart. I listened. I cleaned silver clasps. I repaired tiny hinges. Somehow, helping other women preserve their memories healed parts of me I had not known were wounded. One Thursday morning, 6 months after the locks were changed, Daniel called. I was arranging silver bracelets near the front window. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Hello. Mom. No Vanessa in the background. Just silence. I heard about the shop, he said. Grace posted pictures. It looks nice. Thank you. A long pause. Vanessa moved out last month. I closed my eyes. Not with satisfaction. With sadness. Because hearing my son sound broken still hurt. I'm sorry, I said. He gave a tired laugh. I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. Outside, seagulls moved over the harbor. Mom, he said, voice shaking. I should have protected you. There it was. Not excuses. Not boundaries. Not complicated. Truth. Yes, I said softly. You should have. He began crying quietly. For a moment, I almost reached toward the old version of us. Almost. But healing teaches you something. Forgiveness does not always mean returning to the place where you were broken. I love you, Daniel, I said. That will never change. But loving someone and trusting them are not the same thing. He did not argue. Maybe he finally understood. After we hung up, I stood in the shop for several minutes. My reflection appeared faintly in the glass display case. Older. Softer. Stronger. That evening after closing, I walked down to the marina with a cup of coffee. The sky was gold and pale pink. The wind smelled like salt and spring air. I slipped my wedding ring between my fingers and remembered Richard's voice. Kindness should never leave you vulnerable. For the first time since losing him, I understood. Protecting your peace is not cruelty. Sometimes it is simply the moment you decide your heart deserves safety too.